Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. So yeah, today we are going to be talking about data center automation and cloud technologies. As Rachel said, my name is Chris Snyders, and I am joined here with Alex Minakis. We're both data center SEs at Burwood, covering everything from cloud technologies to your typical infrastructure technologies, backup, replication, you name it. Anything in that data center space is kind of underneath our coverage territory. So moving forward here. So what are the goals for today's webinar? So we wanted to kind of go from a high level. We're going to start off by providing a just brief description of cloud technologies and how to manage them. Everything from the public cloud, private cloud, and something that we're calling the hybrid cloud, and kind of what goes into all of that. We're going to go into a little bit on automation and how that fits into your data center, whether it be a hybrid setup or your private cloud. And then what products are going to fit into each of those different types of clouds. So a lot of different cloud discussion today. At the very end, we're going to be just having a little Q&A session. If you guys have any questions that pop up throughout the course of the presentation, also feel free to put them in the chat. I know Rachel is watching that, so she'll bring our attention to it if needed. So agenda. First thing is going to be just kind of an overview of what goes into cloud and data center automation. Second, we're going to say, how do you ease into cloud? A lot of organizations are wanting to take advantage of cloud, but don't necessarily know the best or easiest ways to kind of, tip their toes into it. So we're going to go over a few different use cases as to how to get into it and how to go about that. Third, ways to leverage cloud and automation technologies. And lastly, hybrid cloud management. So once you get into that mixture of private and public, how do you go about managing it and deploying applications to both of them? So with that, kind of an intro slide here. It's a long journey to the days of the all-public cloud. So the way that we're kind of seeing things is cloud's always been around for quite some time now, and everyone's been talking about it. But the journey of getting there, it takes some time, and the way that we see it is people are going to live in a mixture of a kind of private cloud, public cloud type of scenario for quite some time. The way I personally see it is almost like tape backups to a certain degree. It's like they've always been around, and people always say they're going to be going away at some point, but they never quite go away. So that's kind of how we're seeing the data center. It's always going to be there in one way, shape, or form. So what challenges are there out there that drive cloud adoption? So as you're all familiar with, IT budgets are always getting reduced. Capital expenditures are kind of on the down, and operational expenditures are going up. So that's one reason why a lot of folks are trying to start using the cloud adoption strategies. Staff is being asked to do more with less. Keeping that headcount down and being able to manage more infrastructure, something that everyone's being asked to do nowadays. The budget spent for IT operations, again, it's operational expenditure is why people are looking to move to the cloud. It seems to be a lot more budget allocated to operating expenses as opposed to those capital expenditures. IT staff doesn't innovate. Moving to the cloud allows for more innovation just in general. Other companies are taking care of keeping the lights on as opposed to letting your staff keep the lights on. So this allows for your staff to do more with the time that they have. And then aging infrastructure, slow refresh cycles. It's hardware. You get your 3 to 5 year life cycle refresh, and when you move to the cloud, you don't necessarily have to worry about that anymore. So this next slide here, IT leaders spending too much time keeping the lights on. On average, this is a Forrester report, so what they found here is that on average, organizations spend about 73% of their budget on keeping the lights on. So what we want to do is move some of that over to things like the cloud. So staff can do more stuff like innovate and help with pushing business objectives and things of that sort. So this next slide here, ways to ease into cloud. So talking about that last slide, what are some ways to get into cloud? What are some of those kind of use cases that you can use to leverage cloud in different ways and to kind of use some of that operating expenditures on doing that? So one thing that we're seeing a lot of is backup as a service. So there's a few different vendors that are out there that leverage cloud to basically either tier their backups out to the cloud or just back up straight to the cloud. Veeam Cloud Connect is one of the ones we see the most of. And the way that works is you have Veeam set up on your premise to do your typical backups. And when you have it set up with Cloud Connect, you can then go to a service provider like one here locally, SingleHop, or you can use like Glacier, Amazon, whichever. And you can go and leverage that storage on a per terabyte basis to store your backups as opposed to using hardware on site. Commvault has a similar offering. They can tie in most of the public cloud providers that are out there and use that as a secondary source of storage for their backups or longer-term backup. DR as a service is an interesting one that's kind of gotten some ground lately with a provider here locally in Chicago, SingleHop. Using Veeam or Zerto, there's ways to tie into the SingleHop cloud or Azure or any other clouds that are out there to do disaster recovery as a service. So what we'll do is you sign up with someone like SingleHop, and they'll go and take you through kind of a yearly DR test. They'll help you define your run book, figure out exactly what happens when a disaster is declared, and they will help you fail all your applications over. So it's really nice because a lot of organizations, they claim to have their DR processes worked out, but then when it comes time to actually, declare a disaster, things don't necessarily go according to plan. So having someone like Veeam and SingleHop together really helps to keep the business alive, throughout the disaster. Citrus Cloud's a new one. They just released a new kind of offering around their typical VDI and Zen desktop type of approach where if you want to store the infrastructure virtual machines in the Citrus Cloud, you can do that now. So you would basically store those infrastructure ones up in their cloud, and you would have your VDAs basically on your own private infrastructure, or alternatively, you can have it hosted in theirs as well. But that's a new and kind of fun approach to getting into cloud in one way, shape, or form. Public cloud, everyone's very familiar with AWS and Azure. A lot of times what we see is test and dev get spun up out there to begin with. And, as people get comfortable with test and dev being spun out there, then they'll start putting more and more stuff. We've actually seen a lot of POCs taking place in the public cloud lately, especially those around like big data. We'll spin up the kind of the POC use case in the cloud, and then as things go well, people end up using the cloud more from that perspective. Dedicated cloud services, so we're going to get a little bit more into this later on in the presentation, but basically what this does, it's a nice kind of hybrid between the public cloud and kind of having your own dedicated resources. This allows you to define more of an SLA around kind of your performance requirements and everything. So, as we get more into SingleHop later, we'll talk to you kind of what a dedicated private cloud is and how that relates to, kind of like a public cloud where you don't really necessarily have an SLA around performance. You're kind of intermingled with other organizations and their virtual machines and things like that. So it's a nice other way of kind of getting into it. So, on the automation side, where do you start? Automation has gotten a lot of, kind of talking in the market lately, and a lot of people don't necessarily know where to start with it. So from our perspective, the best place to start is typically with, at the bottom and work your way up. So you want to start with your core infrastructure. You want to make sure that you can get your OSs deployed quickly and kind of in like a scripted fashion. Once you have that, you really want to start working on figuring out the hardware portions of it. So, there's applications like UCS Director out there that will go and take a look at what you have. So, for like FlexPods or Smart Stacks or vSpecs, UCS Director will go and tie into all those things and allow you to script out, say like spinning up a new blade or adding a new VLAN to your infrastructure. So it allows you to kind of script it all out, and that way you can go and deploy them quickly and efficiently without having too many, I guess, configuration mishaps along the way. So once you got that all, worked out with your automation, you go up the application orchestration layer, which is where things like Cisco's Cloud Center comes in. You can go and deploy like 3-tier applications, and we're going to get more into that here in a little bit. But yeah, that's our kind of stance on how to start with automation. So the next slide here, going to be transitioning away from the hardware-defined and moving into more of the software side. And I'm going to switch over to Alex, and he's going to talk through this.
Yeah. So the legacy way of doing IT from an infrastructure standpoint was a lot more hardware-focused. You bought specific pieces of hardware for very specific applications. Every sort of tier of hardware was managed separately. Very difficult to move off one to another. Pieces were very siloed and very difficult to scale. So alleviating that challenge allows you to create more of a software-defined, hardware stack. So taking your compute, your storage, and network, and your security policies, and creating an automated tier between all of those stacks, right? And that's the first step to moving into that private cloud infrastructure, right? Virtualizing the storage, virtualizing network, and obviously, like we've always been doing, virtualizing the server piece for a long time now. So why do you do that, right? Well, one of the key pieces that allows you to be more flexible with is that tiering or that movement into public cloud infrastructure. So the more software-defined you are, the easier it's going to be to move into a public cloud infrastructure that is going to be obviously as well software-defined. Chances are you're not going to find too many that are going to have the exact same hardware as you. So if you're relying on that hardware, you're going to make that transition a lot more difficult. And then that's where you get into the federations between those on-prem and off-prem infrastructures and creating that hybrid cloud. So what does that do for you? Well, it helps you build, for one, that private cloud. It also allows you to do that DR in the cloud, backup in the cloud, and archive in the cloud that we had talked about earlier. So those are some of the key things key pieces that are being utilized today in cloud infrastructure, and definitely, like Chris mentioned earlier, the ways to ease into it. So let's talk about some of those platforms and what they're being used for and various ways you use them, right? So you still have, as you see on the bottom, right, you're still going to have your on-prem infrastructure. That's not going away anytime soon. And then you've got your public cloud offerings, right, the ones we all know, Amazon and Azure. And then you've got your hosted providers, right, or hosted cloud, companies like SingleHop, SoftLayer, CenturyLink, things like that. Well, the question is sort of, what do you use, where do you put it, why, and what do you get with that? So there's a lot of options here, and it's really about defining which one's the best for each application. So you've got your backup as a service, your DR as a service, great doorway products to ease in. But then within those hosted environments, the question is, what level of control do you still want to have, right? So you've got your virtual private clouds, which are going to be on shared infrastructure. This is the type of environment you're going to be on if you're in an Amazon or Azure. But then you also have hosted providers that will offer you bare metal. So they'll provide you the infrastructure at the cost and at that operational expense that you want, but still give you whatever levels of control you want that we'll talk about as well in a second. Then there's also dedicated private cloud. So like Chris mentioned earlier, there's not a lot of SLAs around performance in public cloud offerings. You're not guaranteed a certain amount of IOPS. You're not guaranteed very much except for a certain level of availability. Costs fluctuate. Your downstream data determines how much you pay in a lot of scenarios. So there's a lot of variables there. Some organizations want the operational expense without some of those variables. So purchasing dedicated private clouds out of hosted cloud providers can be a great way to do that. You can have dedicated compute resources, dedicated network, dedicated security, all those pieces to help you ease into that. Also, a lot of times the flexibility around those hosted clouds are beneficial for colo and bring your own cloud, right? Some organizations might want to bring their own storage for very specific purposes, or they have certain pieces of their infrastructure that aren't off refresh yet, right? You want to make sure that you leverage your current investments. So maybe temporarily you want to leverage some of your own compute environment, some of your own storage environment. So you can integrate those pieces by actually bringing them into the data center with your hosted cloud. So this next piece talks about control. So what are some of those benefits, right? Why do organizations use hosted cloud in some scenarios as opposed to just doing everything on Azure and AWS all the time? Well, some of it's control, whether it's compliance reasons, whether it's just, hey, we're not ready to give up complete control over certain pieces of that stack. There's many different layers of control you can have. If you want to just simply get the infrastructure, charged to you as an operational expense, but you want to still do all of the networking, all the storage control, all the management around all of that, you can do that in some hosted cloud providers. If you want them to manage everything up to the virtualization stack, but you still have complete control over the OS, you can do that. If you want even the OS patching and things like that to be handled by them, you can do that as well. So easing that level of control over to someone else is always a challenge, right? It's never easy to just hand over control over pieces that you've managed for so long. So making sure that you have all your options on what you still want to have control over is a very key piece of this. So now I want to talk about a little bit around sort of traditional application stacks. So certain applications are going to need their own dedicated, or have traditionally needed their own dedicated hardware, right? You might buy a storage platform just for your analytics environment. Then you've got, Oracle, which next thing you know, they're trying to get you to buy, is it Exadata, right? To run your Oracle stack on with their servers and storage are finely tuned to run just Oracle, right? But that's a wonderful piece to manage. SQL, Exchange, right? All of these pieces are going to have their very specific best practices, their very specific certified, hardware, pieces below them. And the idea is to move away from that, right? So taking all of those applications and creating that private cloud that they can live on, right? This is going to give you an opportunity to move all of those, create flexibility in your environment, create a place of ease of scale. That way, as each app grows, you're going to be able to make sure that you have the resources for it without having to build all of that out in each individual app's silo. From there, it's about also how, what applications might not be as ideal to keep on-prem. Which ones are going to be more cost-effective for me to send off-prem because of whether it's costs for on-prem infrastructure at a capital expense, whether it's the up and down scale, it does a lot of bursting. Things like that might make it easier for you to move that off-prem. Well, once you create that private cloud, like we talked about earlier, it's going to be a lot easier to move things around. So it might be in hosted providers, it might be in software as a service providers. There's a number of places that this can go, and you need to have the capability to move that back and forth, right? And that's at the application level. So having that flexibility is a very key piece to that cloud management. So now the question is, so what do you use to do that, right? As you're moving all this around, how do you manage this? How do you keep track of where all these applications live once they're off-prem? That's the biggest challenge and one of the #1 reasons why organizations struggle moving to cloud today. So it's typically the approach you take with applications. So when it comes to scripting and creating automation, when you do certain pieces of it, it can be very labor intensive, right? For each cloud or each area or platform that you put these applications on, it requires a whole different level of provisioning and scripting. So if you want to put SAP across Amazon, OpenStack, and VMware, you're going to have 3 different scripts for each environment, right? Well, moving over to the model-based approach is a lot more application-centric, right? It's also cloud-agnostic. You onboard the application once, you create the app profile, and you can deploy that app to whatever cloud is convenient for you based on that current time, right? And it's not just about performance, it's not about infrastructure necessarily. It could also be around cost. So maybe deploying it on Amazon or Azure at different times, because we all, who knows what these are going to cost in a year or two. One might be offering you a better deal or better cost point than the other in 2 years. So how are you going to make that transition? Or are you going to just eat that cost because it's too painful? So you do this by leveraging an enterprise cloud management platform, right? So this could be there's a number of offerings around this. RightScale, Clicker, which is now known as Cisco Cloud Center, Scalar. With an enterprise cloud management platform, it's going to deliver IT visibility and control across multiple tenants, users, and applications, right? So with these platforms, your users can easily model new and existing applications as simple as a single VM or as complex as a full application stack. So this is going to simplify the deployment of any application moving forward. Very useful in large test dev environments and moving between different environments from cloud to on-prem to hosted, right? So modeling a simple 3-tier app, it can be as easy as dragging an OS image, services, layout that you have, containers, configuration tools, all from a library that you pre-build out. Once you have those, you connect tiers and configure properties like firewall rules, runtime scale, scaling, and more, all pre-configured within this the management platform. So from within that platform, you also get visibility across tenants, which is extremely impactful for reporting, security, and service offerings control. This is a key piece of the direction IT's seemingly heading into these days. So the old days of IT just sort of being part of the business and being a cost center are slowly shifting away, right? IT, for each individual organization is having to become that organization's service provider. So to do that, and to do that efficiently, you're going to need that reporting. You're going to need to make sure that you have control over that. So understanding what users from what department and from what part of the organization are provisioning resources is a very key piece. This is probably one of the top areas for helping you shift to being that service provider for your business as opposed to just a support function of the organization. And then obviously helping you move between clouds, right? Like I said earlier, cloud cost changes. So you want to make sure that you can deploy in whatever cloud gives you the best cost point.
Awesome. So yeah, this slide here, this is more just a high-level overview as to the different types of automation orchestration platforms that are out there. You got the 4 different quadrants here, kind of like the Gartner one. And the way this is set up is we got the platform as a service players that are in the upper left. And really, like, this is kind of where, like, if you've heard of Cisco's Metapod, that fits in here as well. This is like managed like OpenStack and things of that sort. On the lower left-hand corner, we got the script section, and this is where a lot of the kind of infrastructure automation happens. You got Cisco's UCS directors in there, Puppet, Chef, SaltStack. And basically, this is just making sure that you can deploy all of your infrastructure in a streamlined fashion, whether it's, just bare metal servers, networks, VLANs of that sort, or even up into some of the hypervisor layer. So it just makes spinning up and spinning down hardware a lot easier. So those are the players that live there. In the orchestration or orchestrators quadrant, lower right, the main one that I've worked with here is VMware and their vRealized automation. This is pretty cool when you mix it with like their SDN play with NSX. You can deploy everything from the firewalls, load balancers, all the way down to just VMs and 3-tier applications. So it really pulls everything together from your private cloud and allows you to do a lot more, a lot faster. So those are the orchestrators, and then the upper right, we got the application section with Scalar and Clicker, or now Cisco's Cloud Center. And what Alex has been talking about the last couple of slides is just making sure you can deploy across all your clouds quickly, easily, and then move between clouds. So Cloud Center does a lot of that for you. Once you have your applications modeled, you click a few buttons and you select your cloud, and you pretty much deploy whatever you want to, where you want to, based on what you have within your environment. So yeah, again, this is just more of meant to be a high-level overview of the different vendors that play in each of these different spaces. And yeah, so I believe this next slide here, Alex is going to take.
So this is to sort of wrap up, the various pieces that we've talked about today. So this is a good view of how all of the players that we've talked about are going to integrate. So you can see here, at the bottom, you've got your typical infrastructure pieces in the bottom left, right? Let's pretend this is a Cisco-centric environment, right? Your Cisco UCS servers, storage vendor XYZ, and your network. Right? Typically things that you all manage separately. Well, once you integrate pieces of automation, whether it's UCS Director, whether it's scripting tools, Puppet, Chef, Ansible, and then software-defined networking, right? So ACI within the Nexus environment, but also VMware's NSX. Those are going to be your infrastructure provisioning automation tools. So once you have those for that infrastructure piece of it, you integrate those directly up into your cloud management software, right? You're creating that the application-centric lifecycle management capability. There's where you can model, you can benchmark, and you deploy. So those lower-level tools are focused on infrastructure, directly integrate into your app-centric tool around cloud management. So from one click inside your cloud management platform, it's going to send all those tools into motion, creating and automating the deployment of the entire stack. And then obviously having that control and that visibility from one window into whether it's private cloud or any public cloud offerings as well. So this is a good view of everything and sort of how it would work. What you would need, the pieces you would need, and how they integrate right there. So this is probably a good time to take any questions.
Yeah, we had a few questions come through the chat function, so I will just rattle them off to you. What are the most common ways you see organizations get into cloud?
Yeah, so we went over a couple of those earlier in the presentation, and a lot of the ways that we see organizations kind of, I think it's tiptoeing into the cloud, using something like backup as a service. That's one of those applications or use cases that a lot of shops are pretty, it's easily moved into the cloud because people don't necessarily want to maintain that backup hardware. They don't want to worry about managing those backups. It's just one of those things that's just kind of keeping the lights on, and that's something that a lot of folks are easy to part with, I guess.
And you mentioned earlier, right? Getting rid of tape.
Yeah,
right?
Getting rid of tape.
You might finally have that chance. Backup into the cloud is actually, even if you don't want it as a service necessarily, and you just want backup into the cloud, still manage it yourself, the low price of Git per gig of storage in the cloud does make it actually a possibility to get close to that very cheap tape cost. Yep. So organizations, they have to keep, whether it's for personal decision or compliance reasons, they need to keep multiple years of backups. It's actually a viable option to put that and deploy those backups into the cloud, as opposed to maybe the unreliable, untestable tape So it's going to be a lot quicker if you get audited to look through cloud archive backups than it is tape backups.
Yeah, let someone else manage that if possible.
Yeah. And then, of course, we mentioned disaster recovery as a service.
Yep.
And notice both of these are essentially insurance policies, right? I don't think anybody really likes spending hours of their week managing their insurance policy. So if there's one thing, even the most, stingent and control freak of like all of us IT engineers is willing to get rid of, it's managing the insurance policy and having somebody else that will take care of that and test it for you, make sure it works, validate that for you. Getting rid of all these couple areas are very, very common and probably the most used to start with.
Yep.
Okay. Do cloud management softwares do the infrastructure provisioning as well?
So yes, so they do if you integrate them with other things, right? So like I touched on in the last slide, if you want to do the infrastructure provisioning, you're going to have to either write your own scripts or you're going to have to integrate with other tools like UCS Director, like Ansible, like Puppet, right? So those are going to focus on infrastructure automation. The cloud management software platforms are really focused on the application layer, right? That's where once you have the model below it, that's where you can deploy it. So you can deploy it all from one place as long as you have the pieces integrated below it, which out of the box, most of the cloud management softwares will integrate with those platforms I just mentioned, those infrastructure automation platforms.